Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time. Not to the gleaming halls of a royal court or the dusty chambers of a legendary wizard, but to the mud-caked, frost-bitten world of the medieval peasant. We're going to pull on our imaginary wool tunics, lace up our worn leather boots, and stand in the shadow of a thatched cottage as the sun dips below the horizon. Feeling the first, sharp bite of winter. Imagine the quiet, the only sounds a distant dog barking, the creak of a wagon wheel, and the wind sighing through bare tree branches. The air smells of wood smoke, wet earth, and something a little less pleasant, maybe a hint of pigsty. You're standing there, watching the last flicker of light fade, and you know this is it. This isn't just a chilly evening, this is the start of a months-long endurance test. You probably won't survive this if you're a modern human, not without central heating and a Netflix subscription. It's a reality check that puts your grumbling about a cold office a bit into perspective. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the cold first in your toes. A deep, pervasive ache that climbs up your legs. The wind, it's not just wind, it's a living thing. A cold, wet hand pushing you toward the flimsy shelter of your home. You're a peasant, somewhere in the 14th century. And this is your life. The fields you toiled in all day, the ones that fed you and your family, are now hard and unyielding under a layer of frost. The sky, a vast and indifferent canopy of fading twilight, offers no comfort. Your shoulders slump with a weariness that's more than physical, it's a deep, existential fatigue that comes from knowing every single day is a grind. You turn and trudge toward the cottage. It's a simple structure, a single-room hovel made of wattle and daub. That's a fancy way of saying woven sticks and a mud and straw mixture. The roof is thick with thatch, a dense layer of reeds and straw, but you know it's far from waterproof. On the ground, a few chickens scratch at the dirt near the door, their tiny bodies puffed up against the cold. A pig grunts from a small, muddy pen beside the house, and its breath comes out in little puffs of steam. You stop for a moment, just before the threshold, and you can see a thin wisp of smoke curling up from the small hole in the roof, the only chimney. This is your world. This is your life. There are no other options. Historians still argue whether the average peasant truly understood their place in the grand scheme of things or if they just accepted it as the natural order of the universe. What's certain is that the cold doesn't care about your philosophy. It just cares about finding a way to leach the heat right out of your bones. As you push open the creaking door, a wave of smoky, animal-scented air washes over you, a promised relief from the biting cold. Inside, the fire in the center of the floor casts dancing shadows on the walls. And your family is already gathered there, a tight-knit cluster of survival. The sight of them, huddled together, gives you a small, tired sense of warmth. You step inside, leaving the black of the night behind, and pull the door closed with a low thud, sealing yourself inside for whatever the night will bring. You just hope that fire holds through the wee hours. The door creaks shut behind you, and the scent of wood smoke and damp earth is immediately overwhelming, a thick blanket of smells that you've come to associate with safety. Your eyes adjust to the gloom, which is only broken by the flickering light of the small fire in the center of the packed dirt floor. This isn't a modern fireplace with a chimney, it's just a small, open blaze, its smoke lazily drifting upward to find the smoke hole in the thatch roof. This is your home, and it's about as cozy as a cave. The entire family lives in this one room. Your wife is stirring a small pot hanging over the fire, and your children are already curled up in a huddle on the floor. A pig snuffles contentedly in the corner, and a few chickens roost on a low beam. The animals aren't here just for company. They're a vital part of the home's ecosystem. Their body heat contributes a few precious degrees to the indoor temperature, a small but significant buffer against the biting cold outside. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate design choice for warmth or just a practical necessity born of poverty. But either way, it works. The pig, by the way, is a particularly prized member of the family. It's a living store of food, fat, and future bacon, a source of wealth more reliable than any coin. The walls are made of wattle and daub, that mix of woven sticks and mud, and they're surprisingly good insulators. but you can feel the draft seeping in around the small, shuttered windows and the cracks in the door. There's no glass in these windows. Of course, they're just small openings covered with wooden shutters. When the shutters are closed, the room is plunged into near total darkness. A deep blackness only relieved by the firelight. It's a trade-off, a little light during the day, or a little more warmth at night. The choice is always for warmth. You move closer to the fire, your hands outstretched, soaking up the heat. The meager light reveals the room's sparse contents: a crude wooden table, a few three-legged stools, and some pottery bowls. Your most valuable possessions are probably the cooking pot and the tools you use for farming. A single, small candle sits on the table, a luxury item that will only be lit for special occasions or to mend clothes. The floor is just packed earth, covered in a layer of straw and rushes that you replace periodically. It's a bit smelly, a bit dusty, and it rustles with every step, but it's better than cold, hard dirt. Your wife hands you a small, wooden bowl of pottage, a thick stew made of whatever you could scrounge up. Tonight it's probably a mix of peas, beans, maybe some turnips and cabbage from the last of the harvest. It's a monotonous diet, the same thing every night for months. And it's a far cry from a modern 5-course meal. But it's hot, and it's filling, and it keeps you alive. You eat it with a small, flat loaf of coarse bread, so hard and dense it could probably serve as a doorstop in a pinch. You'll have to dunk it in the pottage to soften it up enough to chew. A little known fact about medieval bread is that the poorer you were, the more filler was added, like ground up beans or even acorns, which made it last longer but tasted like, well, acorns and not much else. It's a testament to the ingenuity and desperation of your existence. You finish your meal, the simple warmth of the food a momentary comfort against the biting cold you know is lurking just outside the walls. You wipe the bowl clean with the crust of your bread, every single crumb too valuable to waste. Your bowl is empty, and the fire's light is starting to lull you into a state of tired contentment. The meager meal, simple as it was, has settled in your stomach. Now comes the main event of the evening, preparing for sleep. This isn't a simple matter of pulling back a duvet and fluffing a pillow. It's a strategic, communal effort to fend off the cold that will intensify in the darkest hours of the night. You watch as your wife unrolls a thick, lumpy sack onto the straw-covered floor. This is the family's bed, a large, shared mattress stuffed with straw, dried leaves, and perhaps a few goose feathers if you're lucky. The straw rustles and whispers as she spreads it out, a sound that has become a constant backdrop to your nights. This single, communal bed is where you, your wife, and your children will sleep together, a tangled mass of bodies creating a shared bubble of warmth. It's a pragmatic solution to a constant problem: you generate heat. And by sleeping close, you can share it. Forget personal space or individual blankets. This is about survival. Your children, already drowsy, curl up into tight little balls, their small bodies instinctively seeking the warmth of their parents. You lie down next to them, the rough straw poking through your coarse wool tunic. But the discomfort is a small price to pay for the promise of a few hours of sleep. You can feel the breath of the pig and the chickens nearby, their body heated gentle, radiating presence in the cold room. It's a bit smelly, sure, but in the depths of winter, you'd be a fool to complain. This is how it's always been done. Historians still argue whether the close proximity fostered a deeper familial bond or simply a shared misery. You, however, just think about how much warmer your feet feel when they're tucked in close to your youngest child's back. The fire is dying down, its last embers casting a faint red glow. You bank the remaining coals with ash, a technique that allows them to smolder for a longer period, hopefully providing a small ember to rekindle the fire in the morning. This is one of the most important chores of the night, as starting a fire from scratch with a flint and steel in the freezing pre-dawn hours is a miserable task. As the flames shrink and die, the room's temperature begins to plummet. You pull your worn wool cloak over yourself, adding a layer of insulation, and your wife does the same. This is your only blanket, a simple piece of cloth that has seen many winters. As you lie there, waiting for sleep to take hold, you can hear the sounds of the night. The wind howls outside, a mournful, hungry sound that makes the thatched roof groan. The mice rustle in the walls, and the pig snores softly. You can feel the cold seeping up from the packed earth floor. A deep, bone-chilling cold that your combined body heat can only partially repel. The thought of this cold, the same cold that has stalked your ancestors for centuries, is a familiar and unwelcome companion. You pull your legs in closer, feeling the pressure of your child's body against your own, a silent and reassuring warmth. It's not a perfect system, not by a long shot. You'll likely wake up stiff and sore, and you'll have to get up at least once to use the privy, a truly hellish experience in the middle of the night. You'll stumble out into the icy blackness, feel the frozen ground under your bare feet, and then race back inside to the relative warmth of your straw bed. But for now, this is enough. This is survival. The darkness of the cottage is absolute, broken only by the dim memory of the fire's embers. You wake, not to a gentle stirring, but to a series of coughs from your eldest child and the persistent, low-grade ache of a cold that has settled deep in your chest. The air you breathe is stale and thick with smoke, animal scents, and the close breath of your family. It's an environment that a modern doctor would describe as a petri dish. You pull a little more of the shared cloak over your shoulder. But the cold is already winning. This is the reality of peasant life in winter, perpetual sickness. A slight fever is a daily companion. A hacking cough is so common it hardly registers as a complaint. The damp, smoky air of the hovel, combined with a diet lacking in fresh fruits and vegetables, makes you and your family easy prey for every ailment that floats through the village. You have no understanding of germs or viruses. You just know that a chill can turn into a debilitating sickness that can end your life. The lack of clean water, with your well possibly frozen over or contaminated by surface runoff, only makes matters worse. A little known fact is that many people drank weak ale or cider instead of water because the brewing process made it safer to consume, adding a surprising, if mild, booziness to daily life. This was a purely practical choice, not an indulgent one. You feel a persistent itch on your scalp. Lice are a constant and unavoidable companion in a world without regular bathing or clean bedding. It's just another one of those things you learn to live with. Like the rats that scurry in the walls or the occasional flea bite. A fever, however, is a different beast entirely. You remember last winter when a sickness swept through the village. Many of your neighbors didn't make it. You had prayed to every saint you knew and clutched a small, worn charm your grandmother had given you, promising yourself that if you survived, you would give a whole goose to the church. You survived, but you had no goose. Historians still argue whether medieval people were more resilient to these conditions than we are today, or if we just romanticize their endurance. What is clear is that a minor cold could easily become pneumonia, and a simple cut could become a life-threatening infection. Medical knowledge was rudimentary at best, a mix of herbal remedies, superstition, and prayer. A local wise woman or the village priest might offer some boiled herbs or a poultice. But the most common advice was to simply rest and wait. And wait. And wait. You shift on the lumpy mattress, trying to find a position that doesn't make your bones ache. The feeling of another body, your child's or your wife's, is a small comfort, but it doesn't banish the deep chill that has settled in. You can hear the steady, shallow breaths of your family, the small sniffles and coughs that are just part of the background noise. The first light of dawn is still hours away, but you know that even when it comes, it won't bring much warmth. The real challenge of a peasant's winter wasn't a single brutal night, but the relentless succession of them, a grinding test of endurance that slowly wore you down, both physically and mentally. You'll wake up soon to a new day, another round of chores in the frost-bitten world, and the same old aches and pains. This is life, and for now, it's enough. A rooster crows, a sound thin and reedy in the pre-dawn cold. It's the only alarm clock you have, and it's an unforgiving one. You groan and push yourself upright, your joints protesting with every movement. The straw mattress has been a poor bed, and you feel every knot in your back. The room is still shrouded in a deep chill, a few degrees warmer than outside but far from comfortable. The fire is just a memory now, a pile of cold ash and a few hidden embers that you pray are still warm enough to catch a spark. This is the start of your day, not a gentle awakening with coffee and a newspaper, but an immediate and urgent engagement with the elements. Your first task is to relight the fire. You pull out the flint and steel from a small pouch, your fingers numb with the cold. It's a tedious, painstaking process. You strike the flint against the steel, trying to catch a spark on a small wad of dry tinder. Spark after spark fails to catch. Your wife and children are still huddled together on the floor, watching you with sleepy eyes. The fate of their morning warmth rests in your clumsy hands. Finally, a small spark catches, and a wisp of smoke rises from the tinder. You blow on it gently, your lungs working hard, and a tiny flame appears. You feed it with small twigs, then larger pieces of wood, and the fire begins to grow, casting a warm, orange light that chases away the worst of the gloom. With the fire going, the day's chores begin. Your wife will have to fetch water from the well. A miserable task on a cold morning. The well rope is likely slick with ice, and the bucket will come up with a thin layer of frozen water on top. She'll also need to check on the pig and the chickens, making sure they're still alive and well. You, meanwhile, have to tend to the fields. Even in winter, there are tasks to be done. You might need to mend a fence that was damaged by the wind, check on your stored root vegetables in the cellar, or clear a path through the snow. Historians still argue whether the peasants had any true downtime during the winter, or if the list of urgent repairs and necessary tasks simply shifted from planting and harvesting to a constant state of maintenance. You pull on your rough wool cloak, the only thing you have to protect you from the elements. The door opens with a groan, and a blast of frigid air hits your face. The ground is hard and white with frost. Your breath comes out in clouds of steam, and you can see the faint tracks of a fox or a badger from the night before. This is your life. There are no sick days, no paid time off. If you don't do the work, you and your family don't eat. It's a simple, brutal contract with the land. A little known fact is that many medieval villages had designated snowbreakers, or path clearers, whose job was to ensure the main routes to the mill or the church were passable. As a village-wide effort to prevent isolation during heavy snowfalls, you are thankful for them, because it means one less backbreaking task for you to do. You start your trudge toward the fields, your body protesting the cold, but your mind already focused on the tasks ahead. You'll work until the sun is at its highest point, then return for a brief rest, a small bowl of pottage, and then back out until dusk. This is the rhythm of your life, a constant, grueling dance with the cold, unforgiving earth. With the fire finally going and your chores for the day at least started, you trudge back toward the relative warmth of the hovel. The sun is now a pale, watery disk in the sky, offering little in the way of heat. The only real warmth comes from the fire you so carefully tended. And that's where you'll spend most of your daylight hours, when you aren't out in the fields. The hearth is the heart of the home, not just for cooking, but for survival. You sit on a small stool, close enough to feel the heat on your face but far enough away that the smoke doesn't sting your eyes too badly. This central fire is a constant hub of activity. While you work on mending tools, your wife might be spinning wool into thread or weaving small pieces of cloth. The children, when not doing their own small chores, play simple games with carved wooden toys or listen to stories. The smoke from the fire, despite its obvious drawbacks, actually serves a purpose beyond just heat. It permeates the thatched roof, coating the straw with creosote, which helps to preserve the thatch and ward off some insects. A little known fact is that many medieval hovels had an open smoke hole rather than a chimney, as chimneys were a later innovation and often seen as a sign of wealth. The smoke would just fill the room before eventually drifting out, giving everything a distinct, smoky aroma and helping to cure the meat hanging from the rafters. The hearth is also where all of your food is prepared. Your wife uses a simple three-legged pot that sits directly on the coals or hangs from an iron chain. Everything goes into that one pot: the pottage, the stews, even the occasional piece of smoked meat if you're lucky. There's no separate kitchen, no counter space. The entire cooking process is centered on this one spot, a constant, flickering presence in the middle of the room. Historians still argue whether this central hearth design was a purely practical choice or if it also served a social purpose, forcing the family to gather and interact in a tight-knit circle. From your perspective, it's just the place where you try to stop your bones from turning to ice. You pull a small, iron tool from a pouch and begin to sharpen it against a stone. It's a monotonous task, but a necessary one. A dull tool is a useless tool, and a useless tool means you can't work the land. And if you can't work the land, you starve. The rhythm of the sharpening is a soft, Grating sound that blends in with the crackle of the fire and the low chatter of your family. You are a small, self-sufficient unit, a tiny island of human warmth in a vast and indifferent sea of cold. There is no easy way to get by in this world. You can't just go to a market and buy new tools or clothes. Everything you have must be made, mended, or bartered for. The hearth is the central point of this small, self-contained universe, the source of both warmth and sustenance. The one place you can truly rest, if only for a few moments. Before the cold calls you back to your duties, you'll spend the majority of the day huddled here, your life revolving around the flicker of the flames. The short, pale days of winter are not just about survival within the four walls of your hovel. They're also about survival as a community. Life in your village is a matter of collective endurance. There's no cash economy to speak of. Not for most people anyway. Your day-to-day existence is governed by a system of barter and shared labor. If you need a new plowshare forged, you don't pay the blacksmith with coins. You might offer him a few days of labor during the spring planting or a couple of chickens from your flock. The blacksmith, in turn, might exchange his services for wool from the shepherd or a bushel of grain from your neighbor. This interdependence is the glue that holds your world together. You can't survive alone. If your pig gets sick, you consult your neighbor, the one who seems to have a way with animals. If your roof starts leaking badly, the other men in the village will come to help you rethatch it, knowing that you'll do the same for them when their time comes. It's a pragmatic, unwritten social contract, a web of favors and obligations that ensures everyone has a chance to make it through the long, dark months. Historians still argue whether this system was a noble example of communal solidarity or a harsh necessity that prevented individual advancement. But you just know that without it, you'd be starving in a frozen ditch. The lord of the manor, the one who owns the land you live and work on, is a constant presence in your life. Even if you rarely see him, you owe him a portion of your harvest, and you owe him days of labor on his fields. This is part of the system too. A one-way transaction that funds his life of comfort. The tithe to the church is another one. You give up a portion of your meager harvest to the priest. An offering of gratitude and a kind of insurance policy against a bad harvest or worse. Eternal damnation. It's all part of the rhythm. A seemingly unchangeable cycle that dictates every aspect of your life. You are a small gear in a massive, slow-moving machine. A little-known fact is that the most valuable commodity in this barter economy wasn't always food. Sometimes it was animal dung, which was dried and used as a source of fuel for fires, especially in regions with few forests. So yes, you'd occasionally be trading manure for a new pair of boots. A grim reminder of how fundamental every single resource was. The cold outside is a constant reminder of your vulnerability. The village might seem like a bustling hive of activity during the summer harvest. But now, in the deepest winter, it is quiet and subdued. People move with a sense of purpose. Their heads down, their breath steaming in the air. The open spaces are empty. The public well a quiet gathering place only for a few moments at a time before everyone scuttles back to their warm hovels. The collective struggle is visible on every face, etched in the lines around the eyes and the chapped, red hands. But you see a brief nod from a neighbor, a small gesture of recognition, and it's enough. It's a silent acknowledgement that you are not alone in your struggle, that you are all in this together. A community bound by the shared goal of simply making it to spring. The sun is beginning its slow descent, its pale light already fading. The work in the fields is done for the day, and you make your way back to the village, the cold gnawing at your fingers and the weariness a heavy weight on your shoulders. It's an easy mistake to think that medieval life was just a constant state of hardship. But that's not entirely true. It was a life defined by the rhythms of the seasons. A cycle of hard work and then, at night, a brief respite. Life was dictated not by a calendar on the wall, but by the turning of the year. You lived and died by the sun, the rain, and the frost. This strict adherence to the seasons meant that the days were short and purposeful in the winter. You had to get your chores done quickly and efficiently before the light failed completely. There was no electricity to extend the day, no street lights to make the journey home safer. The moment the sun was gone, the world became a black and dangerous place, full of unseen hazards. You had to be back in your hovel, safe by the fire, long before nightfall. This is a life with no optional activities, no hobby that isn't directly tied to your survival. Everything you do, from tending to the fire to mending a fence, is a direct response to a need. You don't get to choose what you do, the land, the weather, and the calendar choose for you. A little known fact is that the medieval concept of time was very different from ours. They didn't have minutes or seconds. The day was often divided into just a few main periods, like dawn, midday, and dusk, with the specific time varying greatly depending on the season. This meant that appointments were often based on natural markers, such as, meet me when the sun is 2 hands high, or, we'll start work after the first roosters crow. This was a more fluid and less stressful way of living, a world where you weren't constantly racing against a clock. Historians still argue whether this lack of rigid scheduling made life more or less efficient. But for you, it just means you can work at your own pace, dictated by the tasks themselves, not by some unseen deadline. As you step back into the familiar warmth and gloom of the hovel, you feel a small sense of relief. The day's work is done, the fire is still burning low, and your wife is already preparing the evening meal. The children are quiet, either asleep or listening to the low murmur of your wife's humming. Now, with the hard labor of the day behind you, you can finally relax, if only for a brief while. This is the moment when the real magic of a medieval evening happens. The time when you get to be more than just a beast of burden. It's the time for stories, for songs, for the quiet moments that remind you that you are a human being, with a mind and a soul that needs to be fed just as much as your body. You sit down by the fire, and for a moment, you just breathe. The rhythm of your life is hard, but it is predictable, and there is a strange comfort in that. With the evening meal of pottage finished, and your body finally beginning to warm up by the fire, the sounds of the day begin to fade into the quiet of the night. This is the time for entertainment, a crucial part of life that was not about escape but about community and preserving the stories that defined you. There is no radio or television, no books to read by candlelight, a small luxury, if you even had one. So, you turn to the oldest form of entertainment there is, storytelling and song. Tonight, maybe your wife starts the stories. She might tell an old folktale about a sly fox outsmarting a greedy wolf. A story you've heard 100 times but still enjoy. Her voice is low and steady, a soothing sound that fills the small room. Your children listen, their eyes wide in the firelight, their imaginations painting pictures of the characters she describes. A little known fact is that many medieval stories and songs were not just for entertainment, they were a way of passing on practical knowledge, moral lessons, and historical events from one generation to the next. The tales of saints or brave knights were a form of oral history, teaching you about the world beyond your small village. Then it's your turn. You might tell a story about a trick you played on a neighboring farmer, or perhaps a more serious tale about a particularly harsh winter from your grandfather's time. The stories don't have to be grand or epic, they just have to be yours. A small piece of your life to share. Your eldest child might then hum a simple tune or a song they learned from a passing minstrel. Music, like storytelling, is a communal art. There's no performance, just a shared moment of simple joy. The songs are often about work, the rhythm of the harvest or the planting season, or about the changing seasons. A way of celebrating the small victories of life. Historians still argue whether this form of entertainment was a pure escape from the harsh reality of peasant life or if it was an essential tool for maintaining social bonds and a sense of shared identity. For you, it's probably a bit of both. It's a way to forget about the frozen fields and the aching cold for a while. A way to connect with your family in a way that doesn't involve survival. It's a simple pleasure, a quiet moment of peace in a world that offers very few of them. As the stories and songs fill the room, the walls of the hovel seem to disappear for a brief moment, and you are transported to a world of talking animals and brave heroes. This small act of shared creativity, passed down through generations, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It reminds you that even in the darkest of times, there is always room for a little light and a little magic. The stories and songs have died down, leaving a gentle, murmuring quiet in the small hovel. Now is the time to turn your thoughts toward other things, to the spiritual side of your life, which is just as important as the physical one. The local church, with its stone walls and soaring roof, is more than just a place of worship, it's the center of your universe. A constant presence that looms over your life from birth to death. The parish priest is not just a man of God, he is a pillar of the community. a source of comfort and guidance in a world that can feel unpredictable and brutal. You think of the last time you went to Mass. The church was cold and drafty. But the flickering candles and the sound of the priest's voice provided a sense of warmth and security you couldn't find anywhere else. The Latin prayers, which you don't fully understand, still have a powerful, calming effect. You feel a sense of connection to something larger than yourself. A connection to God and to the entire community of believers who have lived and died on this same land. The priest, in his simple robes, is the intermediary between you and the divine, and you rely on him for everything from baptisms to last rites. He also plays a practical role in your life. The church often acts as a sort of social safety net. It might have a small store of grain to distribute during a famine. Or it might offer a warm place to sleep for travelers. The priest also provides a rudimentary form of education for the few who are lucky enough to receive it, teaching them the basics of the catechism and perhaps even a few simple letters. A little-known fact is that many medieval churches had a leper's squint, a small hole in the wall that allowed those with infectious diseases to view the service without entering the main body of the church. This small, empathetic gesture is a quiet reminder that the church, despite its power and rigid hierarchy, was also a place of compassion. Historians still argue whether the church's power was a benevolent force that brought order and comfort to a chaotic world or a controlling institution that used fear to maintain its dominance. For you, it's not that simple. It's both. You fear eternal damnation, but you also find a deep comfort in the rituals and the community that the church provides. You have a small, worn wooden crucifix on the wall, and before you go to sleep, you will say a simple, unlearned prayer. A quiet plea for protection from the cold and the sickness. It's a prayer born of necessity, not grand theology. It's just a simple hope that you and your family will make it through the night and that the sun will rise again in the morning. The prayer is a comfort, a small ritual of hope in a world of uncertainty. But you know that prayer alone is not always enough. When the sickness takes hold, or a limb aches with a deep, unyielding pain, you turn to other methods, to the world of superstitions and folk remedies. This is a world where practicality and magic blur together, where a poultice of herbs is prepared with a whispered incantation, and a charm is as important as a bandage. You have no doctor, no pharmacist, just the knowledge passed down from your grandmother and the whispered advice of your neighbors. A little-known fact is that many medieval folk remedies had a basis in herbal medicine, even if the reason for their effectiveness wasn't understood. For a fever, you might be given a tea made from willow bark. What we now know contains salicin, a compound similar to aspirin. For a sore throat, you might chew on sage leaves, which have antiseptic properties. Historians still argue whether this was a true form of early medicine or just a series of happy accidents. What's certain is that your life depended on these simple, often peculiar, concoctions. The superstitions are what truly intrigue you, and they are woven into the very fabric of your life. You have a small, carved piece of wood that you keep by the door to ward off evil spirits. You never walk under a ladder, not because of a vague fear of bad luck, but because you believe it will bring a curse upon your family. For a persistent cough, you might be told to drink a mixture of honey and the hair of a dog that has been boiled in milk. A remedy that sounds more like a joke but which your desperate neighbor swears worked for him. You might tie a red thread around your child's wrist to protect them from the evil eye. It's a mix of logic and magical thinking, a way of trying to exert some control over a world that feels so profoundly out of your hands. The cold is a force to be reckoned with, and it brings its own set of remedies. You might rub goose fat on your chest to ward off a chill. Or you might sleep with a hot stone wrapped in a cloth at your feet. A trick you learned from an old traveler. The sheer desperation of the winter months means you'll try almost anything. You remember a story from a few years ago about a neighbor who tried to cure a sickness by sleeping with a dead chicken on his head. A practice that, as you can probably guess, did not work out well for either the chicken or the man. You scoff a little at the thought, but in the dark of your hovel, when a child's breathing becomes ragged, you'd probably try it too. This is the reality of your world, a mix of simple wisdom and wild, desperate hope. The deep, unyielding cold continues its relentless assault. You've made it through the worst of December and January. But now you face the cruelest month, February. The days are still short. The sun a pale and indifferent presence. and the stores of food that you so carefully laid aside in the autumn are dwindling. This is the time when the cold is most bitter and the hardships are most profound. The well might be frozen solid, forcing you to melt snow for water. A tedious and time-consuming task. The fuel you've gathered, the firewood and the dried dung, is running low, and every single log is a precious resource. This is the month of true scarcity. The pottage is thinner now, made with fewer beans and more wild herbs you've managed to scrounge up. The bread is a dark, dense thing, and you're thankful for every single crumb. A little-known fact is that many peasants would resort to foraging for wild food. Even in the depths of winter, they would search for late-season mushrooms, edible roots, or even bark from certain trees. A desperate measure that often led to sickness if they chose the wrong thing. You remember a story from a few years ago about a family that ate something poisonous and didn't survive the winter. It's a constant, low-grade fear that you live with, the fear of making a fatal mistake. Historians still argue whether the peasants of the medieval era had a concept of starvation, as we understand it, or if it was just a constant state of being less than full. You just know that your stomach aches with a dull, persistent hunger, and your body feels weaker with every passing day. This is the month when the old and the weak are most likely to pass away. You pray every night that your family will not be among them. The cold isn't just a discomfort, it's a killer. And it's most powerful now. You feel a constant, low-grade sense of anxiety, the knowledge that any minor illness or accident could be the end. As you sit by the dwindling fire, you can hear the wind howling outside, a hungry, mournful sound that seems to mock your meager preparations. You pull your cloak tighter, and your wife and children huddle closer to you. You tell them another story. Not a fun one this time, but a story about a time when the food was plentiful and the sun was warm. You tell them about the summer harvest, about the golden fields of wheat and the sweet berries you would pick from the bushes. It's a way of reminding yourself, and them, that this misery is not a permanent state, that there is a light at the end of the long, dark tunnel. But for now, you just have to endure. You have to survive this month, this final test of your strength and resilience. You've made it. You've survived the worst of it. One morning, you step outside to fetch water, and you notice something different. The air has a different scent, not just the smell of cold and wood smoke, but a faint, earthy promise. The frost on the ground is thinner, and in the distance, you can see a patch of ground where the snow has melted away, revealing the dark, wet soil beneath. The sun, when it appears, is a little higher in the sky, and its warmth, though still weak, is a tangible presence on your face. These are the first signs of spring's return, and they feel like a miracle. The change isn't dramatic, of course. This isn't a sudden burst of warmth. It's a slow, agonizingly gradual thaw, but every little sign is a cause for quiet celebration. The rooks, which had been silent for months, begin their cawing from the treetops, a sign that they're getting ready to build their nests. You might see the first tiny green shoots pushing their way up from the softened earth, a fragile but powerful symbol of life returning. These are the moments you live for, the small victories that make all the suffering worthwhile. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were more attuned to the natural world than we are today. What's certain is that every tiny shift in the seasons was a matter of life and death for you. A late frost could ruin your crops, and an early thaw could give you a false sense of security. You've learned to read the land, to understand its moods and its signals. The change in the direction of the wind, the feel of the mud under your feet. These are your weather forecasts, your calendars, and your hope for the future. A little-known fact is that many medieval villages had specific rituals and celebrations to mark the coming of spring. There might be a procession to the fields, a song sung to the newly thawed earth, or a communal feast to celebrate the first signs of green. These were not just religious rites. They were a way of giving thanks to the land that sustained you and a way of expressing the collective relief that you had all made it through another winter. As you look out at the slowly awakening world, you feel a deep, quiet sense of gratitude. The long night is finally ending. The hardship isn't over, far from it, but the possibility of new life is here. And it's all you need to keep going. The signs are everywhere now. The days are noticeably longer, and the sun feels like it's actually trying. The mud on the paths is no longer frozen solid, but a thick, sucking mess that threatens to pull your boots off. A small price to pay for the end of the long winter. A few of the trees are showing the first buds. And you can hear the birds in the morning. Their song's a complex, joyful symphony that has replaced the mournful silence of the cold months. The air itself feels different, no longer sharp and dry but moist and full of the promise of growth. This is the turning point, the beginning of the return to life. Your energy, which was so depleted by the long winter, begins to return in small, quiet bursts. The hunger pangs are still there, but they are no longer a source of fear. You can see the future now. A future where you are planting seeds in the soft earth. A future where you are watching the green shoots of new life reach for the sun. The collective mood of the village is changing too. People are moving with a renewed sense of purpose. There is more laughter, more chatter, a collective sense of relief that the long trial is finally over. Historians still argue about the true psychological impact of the seasons on the medieval mind. But you know that this feeling is real. It's a profound sense of release. A feeling of being unburdened. You no longer have to worry about the cold seeping into your bones or the dwindling of your food stores. You are no longer just surviving, you're preparing to live again. This is a time of renewal, of hope, and of a deep, abiding gratitude for the simple fact of being alive. A little known fact is that the first edible plants to emerge in many regions were often wild garlic or nettles, which provided a much-needed burst of vitamins and minerals after the long, meager winter diet. The first meal you have with these fresh greens will feel like a feast. A reminder of the simple abundance that the earth can provide. You walk out to the fields, and instead of the bleak, frozen landscape you've seen for months, you see a world slowly waking up. A world that is ready to be worked, to be nurtured, and to provide you with everything you need to make it through the next year. You are ready to begin the cycle again. A little older, a little wiser, but still full of a quiet, stubborn hope. The long, dark season is over. You walk out into the field, and the sun feels warm on your back. Not just a promise, but a reality. The earth is soft and yielding under your bare feet, and you can smell the rich, loamy scent of the soil, a smell that you haven't truly felt in months. This is a time of work, yes, but it is also a time of renewal. The collective misery of the winter has given way to a shared sense of purpose and a palpable feeling of hope. The children are running and playing in the fields, their laughter a sound that had been absent for so long. You begin the hard work of preparing the land for planting, turning the soil with a heavy, wooden plow. It's back-breaking labor, but it doesn't feel like a punishment now. It feels like a collaboration with the land, a partnership. You are working with the sun and the earth, not against them. The days are long now, and you work until the last flicker of light has faded. But the fatigue you feel is a good kind of tired, a healthy exhaustion that comes from a day of honest work. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant saw their work as a form of drudgery or a kind of spiritual communion with the natural world. You, however, just know that it is what you were born to do. A little known fact is that many medieval plows were not a single piece of equipment but a series of interconnected parts that were often made by different craftsmen. A testament to the village's reliance on a network of skilled laborers. As you work, you see your neighbors in their own fields, their backs bent over the soil, and you share a small wave or a brief shout. You are all in this together. A community that has faced down the cold and the darkness and emerged victorious. The cycle has begun again. The hardship is never far, and you know that there will be more cold winters and more lean times. But for now, the sun is warm, the earth is soft, and the future is full of the quiet promise of new life. You will plant your seeds, you will tend to your crops, and you will do your best to make it through another year. The sun is low in the sky, a warm, orange orb that casts long shadows across the land. The air is still, and you can hear the soft whisper of the wind through the newly budded trees. The warmth is a comfort, a gentle weight on your shoulders as you make your way back toward the village. The hovel is waiting, its thatch roof dark against the fading light. Your family is waiting, their faces a familiar comfort. The fire is waiting, a promise of warmth and safety. And now, you can rest. The world outside is going to sleep. The fire is dying down to a soft, glowing warmth, and you're settling in. The familiar sounds of your home, the soft rustling of the straw, the gentle breaths of your family, and the low hum of the wind outside, it's all here. A kind of peaceful rhythm, a gentle comfort that washes over you, and as your body begins to grow heavy, and your mind begins to drift, you can feel yourself sinking deeper and deeper, into a quiet, calm darkness. The world outside can wait, the work can wait, you can finally rest. There's no more cold, no more hunger, just a soft, gentle stillness, and a sense of complete peace.